and it's going to make its way into the Holy Word today. And I thought because it's the holidays, I'm going to share with you a miracle story or a series of miracle stories. And I think some of you have heard part of this story. But it begins in 2014. I was performing Loveland, my solo show about grief and loss comedy at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. And I was slated to be there 6 weeks, do 8 shows a week. And I also was offering workshops on grief right after each performance. So 8 workshops a week as well. And it was a beautiful time and something I really wanted because the Arena Stage was probably one of the most beautiful theaters I've performed in. And it was also a launch pad to Broadway and off Broadway, which is something I very much desired with this show, Loveland. And the first week came out, the Washington Post came, and they gave me this review. And the headline read, "Inappropriate in all the right ways." And I thought to myself, oh my God, that's a great title. I'm going to use that someday. And the review underneath, "Inappropriate in all the right ways," was a glorious review from the Washington Post. And as the weeks went on, more wonderful reviews. And I was waiting for the Broadway producer to make his way into the theater one night and say, "You are ready for New York," because things like that happen at the Arena Stage. But it didn't happen. At the end of the 6 weeks, as was supposed to happen, the show closed with no promise to go to New York. And I'm like, okay, now what? Here I am. What do I do? The idea of going back out on the road, I have been on the road living in a suitcase now for 12 years. And the idea of going back to little theaters across the country in order to give it another, but I wanted New York so bad. I wanted it. That's what I want. And it was really hard for me to accept that did not happen. And the other thing, so I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I knew that exhaustion was getting to me. So I thought I will find a place to live and settle down and just trust that it will all come to me. So some friends found this sublet for me in Mill Valley, California. And it's a beautiful place. I love nature. I love hiking, and it's near Muir Woods. And I'm there, and I get scared. I get scared that I won't be able to sustain. So I start booking back out on the roads again because the rent was high and I got full of fear. So the very thing I did of saying I'm going to surrender to just what is, I went into panic mode and went back out on the road. And one of the places I went back out on the road was in 2016 was Kauai. And I have been coming for 2 weeks a year since 2011, leading workshops and doing shows. And the first time I came to Kauai in 2011, a friend brought me here for vacation. And as I was on vacation, running around, met all kind of locals. And they heard what I did, and they said, "Well, Ann, why don't you do your show here while you're on vacation?" And I thought to myself, well, why not? And I said, "Where do you do a show?" And they say, "You do a show at the Church of the Pacific." I'm like, "A church?" So I go to the Church of the Pacific and I meet with the church secretary and I say, "I hear I can do a show here and it's rated R. Is that true?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, you can do whatever you want as long as you remove the crucifix." So I had to put the crucifix in the closet to do the show. But I had a week to prepare. And she goes, "Well, do you need a place to stay?" And I did need a place to stay because my friend was going back to LA who had brought me here. And she says, "We have a little youth minister's cottage on the property next to the pastor's house. You can rent it." So I rent the youth minister's cottage for a week. And while I'm there, I'm rehearsing a video. So I put a video camera in the bushes, and the character I'm playing with is that deplorable character, the Appalachian with the blacked out tooth. And so I went outside and I got on all fours in my bra and I put the camera in the bushes and I tie myself up with a chain to the front porch. And I'm screaming, "You left me tied up in the yard. You left me tied up in the yard." And the next thing I know, the pastor comes from around the corner and I think, oh my God, I'm going to be kicked off this property. And he says, "What are you doing?" I had never met him in my life. And I try to explain what I'm doing. And then he just stops me. And he says, "We welcome all kinds." That was like the best gift. We welcome all kinds. So fast forward to 2016 when I'm living in Mill Valley and I come back for my 2 weeks annual to teach a retreat in Kauai. And I'm talking with the church secretary and I tell her about living in Mill Valley. And I tell her that I'm still out on the road. And I say, really, my dream is Kauai, to live in Kauai, but there's no way this could ever happen because the rents are so high, everything is astronomical. And plus, I have no idea how I'd make a living. And she said, Anne, well, why don't you live in the pastor's house? I'm like, what? She's like, live in the pastor's. I'm like, with the pastor? She goes, oh, no, 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 no. That pastor retired, and the new pastor has his own farm down the road. And you could live there and rent there. I go, I could never afford a pastor's house. It's a 4-bedroom house overlooking the ocean. And she goes, well, the new pastor likes to gamble and he likes to go to Las Vegas. And you know what? You could, we know you're a storyteller. You could maybe do a sermon when he goes to Vegas and that would discount your rent. Now, this is crazy. And I look at this as a miracle. Like, do I take this wonderful offering? It's being handed to me right here. And do I go in fear and go back to what I know? And I said, yes, I will do this, not knowing how the hell I was going to make a living doing this. So I move into the pastor's house. Now, mind you, I'm not a member of this church. I don't like organized religion. So I'm living in the pastor's house. I'm to do the sermon, and he goes to Las Vegas. So I leave Mill Valley. I come to Kauai, and I'm backtracking. The first thing I do is like I got to find a way to make a living. So with this big 4-bedroom house, I think, well, why don't I do retreats more than once a year? Would I be able to fill them or not? And why don't I do small retreats and one-on-one retreats? And I put it out there, and lo and behold, people came. And I was able to make my living just staying in one place and getting my mental health back. And it was all working. I'm like, oh my God, this is truly a miracle. And it's happening on this church property. And then what happened was the pastor went to Vegas. So I had to give the sermon for the first time. And I go to give my sermon, and I do it on Tinder, the dating app. And I think most of the congregation did not get that at all. But while I'm giving the sermon, I feel something come through me like, oh my God, this feels so right. Because I saw that what preaching was really personal story with a teaching, which is very much what Inappropriate in All the Right Ways was. So I'm jumping around a lot, but Inappropriate Right Ways, I began to work on a new show, taking that title from Washington Post and sharing personal stories and combining it with teaching. I'm going to go, that's just like being a minister. And I thought, well, Anne, maybe you should become a minister. But no, I hate organized religion. So that seed was planted 4 years ago. And then about a year later, those roosters are waking me up, and like the crack of dawn, it came to me, Happy Cock Church. Start your old daggone church, and just do it. Well, it took 3 years later for COVID, and on Easter, I launched Happy Cock Church. Now, these are crazy things, and I feel like I'm not really imparting everything I'm going to say, but this was all from letting go, not gripping anymore, not trying to get what I want, which was the New York one, not trying to get this, but just surrendering to exactly what was showing up in my life, which was this thing that I never would have ever dreamed of, which was to do Happy Cock Church, to live in Kauai, to have retreats here nonstop. And over time, my creative mojo got stronger and stronger too, that I felt I was able to replenish and do more. And it helped me so much. And so I'm asking right now, this was like truly a miracle, one right after the other. And the other thing, the pastor who likes to go to Vegas is also a taro farmer. He's a sustainable farmer, and he's Japanese. And early on, he noticed that I like to go into character when I was uncomfortable. He really early on saw that I would go into different voices, and he'd say, Anne, practice being you, practice being your real voice. So every opportunity in church, he'd make me use my real voice, not default to character. So I felt like I also had this mentor that was continually making me be in my own skin rather than to go out into crazy comedy characters. Not that I'm going to lose them, but I was so uncomfortable just standing in my own skin. So I had this mentorship with him. And I share this with you because this is the last thing I would have ever expected in my whole entire life. And I think Miracles happen, shifts happen when you let go and you totally accept what it is, that you just surrender to what it is, what's arriving in your life, and loving what you get instead of going out like, I want, I want, I want. It was truly transformative. And then, kind of like another huge thing is that 2 years ago, I was doing Inappropriate in All the Right Ways at Esalen in Big Sur. And I was teaching there, one of the few places I went off to do the road. And I went back to Esalen. And at the end of doing that show, a Broadway producer comes up to me and says, I'd like to take this show to New York City. I'd like to option it. So all of a sudden, without leaving Kauai, without leaving anything, I have this option now to go to New York with a new show. But I am in a different place right now, such a different place. I no longer have this thing, if I don't get it, I'm going to die. I've got to have it if it doesn't happen. And if it doesn't happen, I've now learned from this whole journey of letting go of that want, gimme, 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 surrender, to surrender, that it all comes. Everything you need comes. And the first thing to do is just say no. Say no to what's not working in your life. Say no to what no longer serves you. And then just watch what shows up to you. And it's truly a miracle. Oh, holiday miracles happen. And I was sharing this with Pastor Clyde, who is the tarot farmer here. And believe me, they know that I love Buddhism, Tao, that I love it all. I was showing that right before I started Happy Cock Church, I finally had the guts to tell him that I wanted to do a church called Happy Cock Church. And he goes, Ann, why don't you call it Miracles Abound? I was like, he goes, that's what happened to you. I'm like, I'm not calling it Miracles Abound. I'm calling it Happy Cock Church. So anyway, I share this story with you, and I hope you find inspiration. If you're in a place of not knowing, in transition, and things haven't worked out the way that you thought they were going to work, just trust. Don't go grasping anymore. Let go and see what arrives to you. And I'm going to tell you, you will get a holiday present. Okay, that is my cocktail.